Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to The Heartbeat, the place where I talk about just a few of the things that make this little guy tick. Today, we're going to talk about Season 1 of The Leftovers. Join me, won't you? Alright, so this will be a spoilers review of this first season of The Leftovers, so you have been warned. But, let's jump straight in, shall we? The Leftovers, conceptually, in a nutshell, is actually pretty easy to explain. Essentially, without warning and without explanation, 2% of the world's population disappears, or departs, as it's often referred to. And the show itself actually takes place 3 years after that potentially supernatural event, set in the little town of Mapleton, New York, following a certain group of characters as they continue to wrestle with and struggle with just the questions of what happened. Why were those who were taken? Why were those who were left behind? And will their lives ever really return to the way that they were before? Jumping straight into the positives, things that I found that worked in this first season. First and foremost, the writing. Tom Perrotta and Damon Lindelof, Tom Perrotta being the book's author on which the series is based, and Damon Lindelof being the showrunner, both were just extremely inventive and bold. Not only were they inventive in coming up with that initial concept of the departure, but bold in not resting on their laurels and allowing that to be the only mystery that we as an audience contemplate. They were almost every single episode breaking new ground, introducing new mysteries, answering mysteries, and really pushing the envelope in. This wasn't a procedural, and especially compared to so many television shows out there, for me anyways, this is what I like in television. It was a breath of fresh air to see that boldness, to see the fact that they weren't afraid to change it up. And don't get me wrong, I get the pressure that a lot of showrunners are under. They assume that an audience watches the pilot episode and signs up for a certain type of television show, and the fear is if we change that up too much, we'll lose our audience. And The Leftovers did not do that. They were constantly breaking new ground, having their characters do really crazy things that forced the show to change. But not only were they bold, they also, the writers bravely accepted the consequences, realistically, of what those bold actions meant. So for instance, if a character was stabbed, if a character went insane, if thousands of dollars worth of money was lost, they changed, the characters changed, and the show changed along with it in a very realistic way. Damon Lindelof's writing is also just very strong and distinct, and I really like it. I think the best way to describe his kind of style of writing is it's very musical. And what I kind of mean by that is each episode and kind of each season, there's a chorus that's returned to time and time again. And so, for instance, the chorus of a certain episode may be, for example, Garvey's search for the deer, or Garvey's attempt to tame a dog, or Garvey's attempt to find his missing shirts, or find the missing baby Jesus, or Nora's attempt to find her missing name tag, or Matt's continual encounters with the pigeons. And those are going to be the chorus, the scenes that are built to and kind of built out of each time. And each of those scenes kind of being the verses. And not only do those tell us something about those characters, if Lindelof is really firing on all cylinders, and he really was for a lot of this season, it also plays directly into the themes of the series. And so in this case, obviously, the theme that was kind of being recurring time and time again was that of disappearance and what happened and why, and well done, really well done. Also, another aspect that I found to be extremely strong was characters. And for any of you who are following or have followed Lindelof's filmography over the last few years, this may come as a bit of a surprise, especially considering his last few film efforts, which I found to be, in the character department, very lacking. So Tomorrowland, Prometheus, Cowboys and Aliens, Star Trek Into Darkness, the characters were some of the weakest parts, in my opinion anyways, of those films. And watching The Leftovers was kind of a revelation to me, in that Lindelof is really made for the TV pace and the TV format. And especially looking back at Lost, where I find that one of the most successful things about that show were the characters. They were varied, and if you didn't see the show through Jack's eyes, maybe you saw it through Locke's eyes, and if not through Locke's eyes, then maybe through Hurley's eyes. And in the same way, you had so many different avenues in The Leftovers to enter in and experience the show with the characters, which Lindelof does exceptionally well in that TV format, where he has just a little bit more time to develop things. Another huge standout for me was just the atmosphere of the whole show. It was so cinematic. Every single episode pretty much started with this very lyrical, oftentimes just completely music-driven, without dialogue sequence, which really put a stamp on every single episode and just constantly reminded the audience that this is a very cinematic show, and you're going to be drawn in through those, that usage of the camera, the usage of beautiful music, and also the location that they chose up in New York with the snow. It was just chilling and cold and brutal and raw, and that just fit right in with the tone of the show. And the music, I have to mention the music. Oh my goodness. Max Richter was just phenomenal. I think some people actually have criticized the music, saying, it's just so repetitive and it's the same melody over and over again. And for me, that's actually why I compliment the music, because that's exactly what this show is like. It's exactly like the poster image, where Garvey's got his head and fist up against the wall, and he's just been pounding over and over, and hope, where's my hope? Where's the hope? And that music that kind of recurred over and over again, just that haunting, kind of hopeless, and yet with a twinge of like a spark of hope mixed in there, was really the tone of that first season, and the music did that for me. Also, finally, another huge standout for me was just the leanness of the season. I love the short season format for television. I think the BBC does it really well. I think Netflix does it really well. And it just really has the potential to leave me wanting more while also being satisfied. I didn't get to the end of the season and go, man, that was a pretty solid season, but there was a number of kind of superfluous episodes that could have been cut. It really felt lean and left me wanting more. I definitely have to mention some of the things that didn't quite work for me. No television show is perfect, save maybe Breaking Bad, but that is a different discussion. For me, one of the things that didn't work perfectly was just the balance of tone. Like I mentioned before, there is that image of Garvey pounding against the wall, and that was the tone of this first season for 95 to 97% of it. And it worked well, but it just felt a little imbalanced, and oftentimes would leave me completely drained and kind of asking the question, why are these characters even going on, and why should I go on with them? And that's not what you want to be experiencing while you're watching a television show. You want to be drawn back into it each week, and that sometimes kind of left me going, wow, do I want to return to that really draining series? And I guess for that reason, I would say this is probably not the best show to binge watch. Probably pace it just a little bit. Another thing that wasn't perfect for me was, and I guess I should say before giving this critique, I was very impressed for a show that was as earnest, that was as grim, that was as somber, that it wasn't as cheesy as it could have been. Nonetheless, there were a handful of scenes, a number of lines, and a few just moments that just didn't come off as genuine to me, and especially the flashbacks, specifically in the pilot episode, and which is a real bummer, because those had the potential of being this really chilling reminder of what the characters carry in their minds every single day, what happened 3 years prior, and they kind of just came off as a little bit cheesy, which was a bit unfortunate. Some of the standout moments from the season, there are so many to mention, and I don't want to go on and on, so I'll just mention a few of them. And I do want to say also, as I was watching the series, just to kind of keep things straight in my mind and make sure I was kind of responding to it in the moment, I kind of just jotted down notes as I watched each episode. And looking back through the notes, I was really surprised how many times I wrote, wow, this character said that. Wow, this character did that. And that's really impressive to me. There were just a lot of wow moments that surprised me, but then also didn't feel cheap. Again, they bravely owned the consequences of those wow moments, which is a hats off to them. With that said, though, I found it really impressive that some of the biggest standout moments for me were really small, poignant moments. So, for instance, even in the pilot episode, when Garvey goes to visit the Guilty Remnant, and we discover for the first time that his wife is part of the Guilty Remnant, and there's not some big loud fight, or he doesn't accost her verbally or anything like that. He just says, hey, how's it going? Want to go for a walk? And it just said so much about their relationship and so much about where they had come from, and that, all those loud verbal arguments had kind of already passed, and he's just this man at the end of his rope, and he has no other way of getting to this woman besides kind of just pleading to her. That worked really well. Another great moment was in episode 3 at the very beginning, after the Reverend Matt has been praying with his congregation for this little girl at the hospital. He goes to the hospital and goes to her room and finds that it's empty. And he asks the doctor, where's the girl? And the doctor's response is oh, she got better. She left. And Matt just lights up. And there's just that moment of wow, we were praying for her just this morning. And the doctor responds saying, oh, well, she got better last night. Went home then. and it's just this punch in the gut, and just completely told me exactly how this character of Matt felt, which is useless, which is just crushing. I definitely have to mention some of the big wow moments. Obviously, the moment where you think that Garvey's finally figured this horrible situation out with Patty. He's gonna let her go. He's gonna do the right thing, and she just picks up that piece of glass and just slashes her own throat. And I was just, oh gosh. And speaking of other moments of just kind of wow violence, the moment where Gladys, one of the guilty remnant, is taken and tied to that tree and stoned. And right before she goes, she just breaks her silence and says, please stop. And for me, that was just this huge paradigm shift in my mind of viewing the guilty remnant as only this kind of mysterious, stone cold, know exactly what they're doing, kind of cult, to being, oh, these are very human people who are just as lost and just as afraid and struggling just as much as anyone else to figure out what's happening and how to move forwards in their life. And that was a big moment for me, for sure. And I definitely have to mention also the second time that we see the departure. It's in the penultimate episode, which actually, in contrast to the first time that we see it, at the very beginning of the pilot episode, the second time you see it in the penultimate episode, it really worked for me in a way that it didn't initially in that pilot episode. And it was just one of those situations where you had the time to really get to know the characters, get to see their lives and all the good things that their lives were, and some of the bad things, and then just kind of see that completely ripped away from them when the departure takes place. And it was just very chilling and very cinematic. Again, it goes back to that. This is a very cinematic show, just as they kind of cut from one person's reaction to the next. And speaking of cutting from one person's reaction to the next, the final standout moment that I'll mention now, again, there's so many more, but the final one I'll mention for now is just the moment where we finally see in the final episode what the guilty remnant has been building towards this entire time, which is this big reminder to the town, one that they're not going to forget anytime in the near future of what happened 3 years ago with the departure, when they essentially have all these dummies made that look like their loved ones that were departed, and they kind of put them back in their lives. And seeing Nora just break down, and seeing all these other characters just have to be confronted once again by that unexplainable, horrible event that so many of them are just wanting to forget and move past. Very effective. So the bottom line, was this a show that I think that you should invest your time into and that you should invest your heart into? Yes, absolutely yes. I definitely give it my stamp of approval. I found it to be exceptionally well written, beautifully and subtly directed, and just with phenomenal performances. It was absolutely the mysteries that drew me in, but it was the characters, their relationships, and their dynamic that definitely sustained me and kept me going. I definitely would be remiss if I didn't mention that I feel like I am curious to see where the show goes. I feel like Lindelof is really good at asking questions and presenting a series of characters who are interesting to watch as they wrestle with not having the answers. But that's only sustainable for so long. And if you continue to allude to the audience that you're going to give them the answers, you better give them the answers, and they better be pretty darn good if you put off giving those answers for a long time. Because whether you want it to be the main thing or not, inevitably audience members will want to know some sort of answer. So if Lindelof can find that balance, if he can provide the right number of answers in the right way, we'll see. I'm definitely curious to see how that goes. But that's just my opinion. That's just how I felt about the first season of The Leftovers. I would love to hear what you guys think. Definitely comment below. Mention to me some of your standout moments. Did the season as a whole work for you? What were some of the things that didn't work? I would love to hear all those things. Love to get that dialogue going. Also, this is my very first video review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love for you guys to come back. So please do subscribe. Next week, I'm planning on doing a bit of a looking forwards to the second season of The Leftovers. Things that I'm looking forward to, things I'm a little bit concerned about, and I would love for you guys to come back for that. So please do subscribe. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you so much for joining me.